This conference will now be recorded.
I'd like to welcome everybody tonight, brothers, sisters, sons, maids, all distinguished guests, members of the Supreme Lodge, members of the District Lodge, any members of the clergy in the Archdiocese. I'd like to thank you all for being here. I'd like to welcome you to the AHEPA family of Hempstead, the History Series, Introduction to Byzantium, featuring Vassilios Billy Chrissochos. I'd like to say a few things before we get started tonight. I'm going to kindly ask everybody mute their mics, as we will be muting everybody's mics at this point on. I'd like you to save your questions for afterwards when our presenter finishes speaking tonight and gives his presentation. At that point in time, I'll ask everybody to kindly start their questions using the chat, which is a closed caption, and I'm sure our presenter will go through that again with you. Again, please refrain from asking questions till the event has finished, and then we'll be doing questions and answers. At this particular point in time, I'd like to talk to you for a few minutes in regards to Brother Vassilios Billy Chrissochos, who is an AHEPA District 6 Director of Culture and Arts for all of New York. He has been the past Director of Hellenism for New York State. He is also the AHEPA Hermes Chapter 186 of Astoria, New York, Vice President, and he was the past President of their chapter. He is now currently again the Vice President of the Hermes Chapter number 186, and he is the Director of Culture and Arts for the New York District. He is also the UNESCO BDAS New York Director of Modern Music, an awarded music video editor, and a member of ASCAP. He founded the Greek Artists Guild, the Hellenic American Center of the Arts, and the Alexander the Great Living History Society. With his wife Despina, they founded Porphyra Foundation, which aims to promote cross-cultural education through compassion and inspirational works. He has a BA in Political Science and History and a minor in Education from Queens College. Vassilios Billy Chrissochos was awarded the AHEPA of the Year for New York in the 2018-19 year. Vassilios Billy Chrissochos is also a member of the Hellenic Cultural Society of St. Nicholas in Flushing, New York. Vassilios Billy Chrissochos is a historical consultant who has given presentations on various Hellenic-themed subjects, such as the historical significance of Orchidea. That's the historical significance of Orchidea. He's also given Byzantium, Macedonian Dynasty, Byzantium for Beginners, Cleopatra VII, Visionary Queen of Alexander the Great's Hellenistic Age, and 1821, the liberation of Greece, amongst many, many others. At this particular point in time, I'd like to introduce Billy and turn the floor over to Brother Vassilios Billy Chrissochos. Welcome, Brother Billy. Thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you, Brother Anastasios. Thank you very, very much for that wonderful introduction. I just wanted to make one point. I was the past secretary and the current vice president of the Hermes 186 chapter in Astoria. Not president yet. And I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. All the our AHEPA brothers, the AHEPA Hempstead family, Pasithea number 141, the Constantine Cassis chapter 170, Lord Byron, Sons of Pericles 233, and the Maids of Athena Victory number 76, and all other members from the district and the AHEPA Lodge and non-AHEPA friends that are joining us for the first time here. Thank you very much again. So I wanted to start with an instruction of how to use the forum that we're using, GoToMeeting. If you want to ask some questions later on, which we're going to be taking right after the presentation, a questions and answer period will follow, and you can type in your messages. Let me put that in right now. Right here in the chat forum. So when you see your GoToMeeting to the right, up, you're going to see a dialog box. It says chat, and that's where you're going to type your question. Just hit the mouse, enter your messages where you see it on the bottom, and you'll be able to type in your question, and Brother Anastasios will read it, and then I will answer with a reply. So if you're not familiar with this, that's the chat balloon, the dialogue. There's how many people are next to it, and before that is going to be your face and all the other people that are watching. All right, so that's that.
Thank you, Brother Billy.
You're welcome. So this is presented by our Porphyra Foundation, nonprofit organization, which we do a lot of different projects that deal with Greek history. We did a rock opera, a Byzantine rock opera, at Carnegie Hall with my band Porphyra. It's called Anna and Vladimir, the Love that Rocked the World. Classical opera, Greek themed, done at Lincoln Center. Panagiotis Karousos is one of our partners. He's an international known composer in Greece. We did the Olympic Flame in honor of the Olympic Games. And we have a show with my co-anchor, George Zelinsky, called The Quest for Prometheus. That's going to be on the Porphyra Foundation and the Patreon Hellenic History series, which we discuss historical issues and modern politics that deal with Greece. So I see the Hellenic History series, which is a part of. I'm working on an illustrated history book of Greek heroes. As you can see, this is a sample of it. It's in the process, and that's all also in Patreon. That's a website where you can follow, help out, and we do all these educational programs. Our lecture is called Introduction to Byzantium. This is one of my favorite topics. I kind of believe that in a past life I lived there. I don't know. Everything I do leads around the Byzantine history and that wonderful but forgotten epoch of ours. So we're gonna go through a few things just to give us a background of why Byzantium is important, why we need to study it, and how does it relate to the rest of Greek history. So very basic things. This is a timeline of Greek history, which I use in all my presentations. And Greek history goes very far back. We can stay, the Bronze Age and 9000 BC up until classical Greece. That's so many civilizations that we had already. Then we have classical Greece, Alexander the Great's Hellenistic Age, Roman era Greece, and then Byzantium, which lasted for 1100 years. And that's the topic right now we're going to discuss. And why do we study Greek history? We study it to learn about democracy, philosophy, engineering, art, mythology, and Christianity, something we kind of overlook sometimes. The Bible, the Old Testament, the Greek New Testament. So these are the things that deal with Byzantium, and these are Byzantium is the carrier of the ancient Hellenic ideals. I try to use as much as I can things, the drachma from the Greek government that illustrates Greek history, and something we don't have anymore, but for a long, long time, the drachma was a visual guide to Greek history. And when the modern nation came about, a lot of the Greek heroes were shown on the currency. And you can see Alexander the Great in the top, Constantine the Great, Pericles, Zeus, Bubulina, Pericles, and so forth. So everything that I try to incorporate into my lectures is also based on stuff from Greece, from actual the money, the stamps, the coins. These are historical things that are true. So in order to even start talking about the Byzantine Empire, we need to go back to Alexander the Great and his importance in the world. He brought the civilization of Greece, the golden age of Pericles, the Athenian language, the arts, the tragedies, and created a vast kingdom after he liberated the Greek cities under Persian domination in what is now Turkey on the Aegean coast. All right, so this is Alexander the Great's empire that stretches from Greece all the way to India, modern-day Pakistan. You see Egypt, and most of the Middle East, which is very important in our story. This is Alexander the Great's first. This is Greece's first global empire. It's called the Hellenistic Age of Alexander the Great, which spans 300 years from the time of his birth up until 10 AD. After Alexander, successor kingdoms form, and this is the Hellenistic world. And there are 4 successors: Lysimachus, Cassander, Seleucus, and Ptolemy. So when we talk about the evolution of Greek history and the importance of Alexander the Great, we overlook that after he passed, the world was run by Greeks for 300 years. So in the books, you just see that they quarreled and they did nothing, which is untrue. And that's kind of a very biased view, which if you were to study this history in an academical, with an academical approach, you will see that every modern city from that world was built by those Greeks, whether it was in Afghanistan, Kabul, Karnoon, or Antioch, Baghdad, Beirut, Alexandria. All those Greek cities built under the rulers of the Hellenistic era. They even reached India. We had inter-Greek kingdoms in India, northern India, and Bactrian kingdoms, and something called the Greco-Bactrian kingdom. So the Greeks were in the Far East for a long time, up until 10 AD, and then their ancestors assimilated with the local populations. But they carried on the Greek traditions even in those areas of Afghanistan, Pakistan, and northern India. So back in the West, at the time of St. Paul, after Jesus, Christianity was being preached. And the Apostle Paul had a vision that a Macedonian man came to him and asked him to go to Macedonia. And that's what prompted him to travel to Greece, starting with Macedonia and then to Corinth and all the other places. And he made 3 missionary journeys. This is a map you can see clearly. He went to Neapolis, which is Kavala, Philippi, Amphipolis, Apollonia, Thessaloniki, and Veria. So I'm trying to explain to you, Macedonia always played an important role in Greece's history. And it's going to keep on playing a role in our story as well here. So as St. Paul journeys excessively preaching the gospel of Jesus, Christianity begins to spread in the Roman Empire. So by this time, we have the Roman Empire that takes over. The purple areas are the beginning of Christianity, and by the green is the influence of the fullest extent by century of Christianity in the Roman Empire. So at this time, Macedonia, it was a theme. It was basically a very large area that encompasses or diocese all of Greece. So we have Thrace and Macedonia and other themes. And that's very important because in the ancient times, Macedonia was the name for all of Greece. All right, just remember that. Now, there is a continuity between Alexander the Great's empire and the Roman Empire. And this is very commonly shown in this coin, where you see Constantine the Great and Alexander the Great, showing the continuity of Hellenism. All right, this is a 4th century gold coin. And this is the Greco-Roman world. And as you can see it in this map, Emperor Diocletian split the Roman Empire in roughly the 3rd century, the late 3rd century, 294 AD, and into the Greek East and the Latin West, because the empire was too big to hold and to govern from Rome. And eventually, the western part of this empire will also collapse to the barbarians, the Visigoths and other barbaric tribes from central and western Germany. But the East will go on to thrive for over 1100 years. So Constantine the Great was born in Nice, in what is now modern-day Serbia. He is of Greek descent. He is from the theme of Macedonia. His mother is Helen, who went on a pilgrimage to discover the cross of Christ, and where our church in Jerusalem, the Church of the Sepulchre, stands, is the tomb. They also discovered around that time, and they built the church that became the cathedral. He was a devout Christian. And while they tried to make many reforms to hold the Roman Empire together, it eventually did split, and Byzantium was rebuilt by Constantine and became known as New Rome, or Constantine City, Constantinople, by 330 AD. And that's the official date of the Byzantine Empire. All right, the power from the west, Rome, now goes into the east, Constantinople, and it lives on for another 1,000 years. So 1100-year reign is Greece's second global empire, and it spans between 330 approximately till 1461 when Trebizond fell. So after the fall of Constantinople, there was still another Greek kingdom that lasted a little bit longer in Pontus, in Trebizunda, and even in Athens, in the Peloponnese, Moria, and some other areas fell a little bit later. But this is the scope of the what we call the Byzantine Empire. This is from my trip to Hagia Sophia, one of my 2 trips to Turkey. I took a picture of the inside of the dome, the Virgin Mary and Christ. What you see when you go into the great church of Hagia Sophia. And I'm just gonna show some imagery from Hagia Sophia just to bring us a little bit to the present and what's happening now in Turkey as the Prime Minister Erdogan, this dictator, turned again Hagia Sophia, which was a museum for about 80 years, back into a mosque. And I will mention a few things why that's an important issue. So the nomisma, the gold solidus or the Byzant, was established by Constantine the Great, and it was the gold Byzantine coin, and it remained unchanged for almost 800 years. It was the symbol of Byzantium's powerful economy, and it was the international standard for trading. So when you think of ancient Greece, when you think of technically medieval Greece, which is the Byzantine Empire, you don't think about economy, you don't think about how strong and powerful they were, but they were the strongest. It was a super state. So when we lead to inspiration on how to govern, they twisted these terms. Byzantine, that means the duplicitous, bureaucratic, and corrupt, which is untrue. That's a specific propaganda that started by Northern Europeans later on, and the empire was a powerhouse. It was at the crossroads of trade. If you're familiar with the Silk Road, which began even at the time of Alexander the Great with China, it was under the Byzantine Empire, this 1100 years, that trade in the ancient world that carried down to the medieval world, and spices and silk was the more important than gold at times. So the road that went from China through the Middle East ended up in Constantinople, and then from there it went into the rest of Europe and Africa and other places. So we had a link between China and Constantinople, and that was with the Silk Road. As this presentation shows, for over 800 years, Byzantium never had to declare bankruptcy of any sort. And that only happened after the Fourth Crusade. Some important things that we need to understand. Constantine the Great was very involved in Christianity, in Orthodox Christianity, even though the church was one at the time. He wanted to be involved and to weed out many heresies that were happening throughout the Christian world, and to build a standard of how to believe and to codify the Bible. And there were many ecumenical councils that were held. So he called the first ecumenical council to settle disputes within the Christian church, and this led to the formulation of the Nicene Creed, amongst many other things. So that's that we believe in the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. That was the key thing to establish Christianity and centralize it and get rid of the heresies. And that was established in 325 AD. He also tried to undermine a lot of the Latin popes, because I'm just gonna explain a little bit. By now we have a Latin Roman Empire and we have a Greek Roman Empire. It's not just a Greek-speaking Roman Empire. If it was just that, we wouldn't exist. We wouldn't be here speaking to each other only. I mean, this is a Greek Empire. It's a little complicated, but the Roman Empire was split into these two halves, and there were Greek-speaking peoples, Greeks, and also Latin-speaking people, and Italians, Romans. This is another image I had taken from Hagia Sophia of Christ Pantocrator. Byzantium helped form all of Christianity, but the eastern half is the basis of Orthodox Christianity. That's a very important image in Hagia Sophia. of Christ, and that's actually what inspired many other works and icons and images for the last 1500 years. So this is just an introduction to Byzantium, and we're gonna go through a few points and interesting names we have to discuss, because as Greeks we use a lot of names for ourselves, and I need to make this point also, that the Byzantines never referred themselves as Byzantines. Right? We know of them like that now, but that's only in the last 200 years that this became a popular term that took the name of Byzantium, of the city that was before Constantinople, and subscribed it to the whole empire. What they called themselves was Romae, yeah, Romans, and they believed in Romeosini. So when you're studying Roman history, this is very critical to understand that after Constantine, and even it's before, about 100 years earlier, from the reforms of Theodosius, Diocletian, and other emperors, Byzantium had already begun this idea that the East was different because it was a Christian empire. But with Constantine the Great, the Roman Empire of the now the eastern half, and Constantinople, its capital, becomes a distinctively Christian Roman empire. All right, and that's a distinctively Christian city as opposed to the old pagan Rome. And that's a main difference, because as the centuries evolve, the Eastern Romans, which there's another name we can call them, the Romans from the East, the Greek Romans, were actually Christians, while the latter Romans in the beginning were pagans, and eventually they became Christian. But by that time, about 100 years after Constantine, Rome falls. All right, and that's the end of the Western Empire, and then it's up to the East to reconquer it, but now for the Greek Roman Empire. All right, so this is where it gets a little confusing, but to be a Roman back then was not in the sense that you think of it today. Kind of Greece lost this, what I call is the trademark to the name. It was meant for Greeks and Latins to be called Romans. All right, there were Christian Greek Romans, not Latin Romans, but now we call them as Byzantines. What is important though, Byzantium was a Greek Christian multicultural empire. If you were to break it down for a modern audience, that's how I will explain it. It's not a multicultural empire with some Greeks living in it. The nuclei, the elite that dominated Constantinople, and the ideology, the theology, and the ruling were Greek. Now you could be an Armenian, you could be a Slav, you could be an Italian, you could be an Ethiopian, you could be a Bulgarian, you could be a Georgian, you could be anything. You're part of this world, and you can still be called a Roman or in the modern sense a Byzantine. But it was a Greek empire. Let's not confuse ourselves that it was not. Any empire has other people living in it. The Russian Empire wasn't just Russian. The German Empire was not just German. There were Slavs. There were Italians. There were Greeks. The same with the Russian Empire. The same with the Serbian Empire. The French Empire. So we need to associate that with the Byzantine Empire, which was the Roman Empire of the East. All right. This is another image which is important, as I said throughout the presentation, highlighting some images from Hagia Sophia and some that I had taken for my trips in '98 and 2000. I had visited all over Turkey because I have a lot of books I read. I'm a history buff, but I wanted to actually see these places for myself. So I've been to Russia, I've been to Serbia, and I've been all over Turkey twice. And I didn't want to just read the books and believe the rhetoric. I wanted to actually stay there, explore, and understand the culture for myself. So anyway, this is another image of, this one is of Christ, Pantocrator, and on one side is Constantine the Ninth Monomachos and the Empress Zoe. So these are the rulers from the Macedonian dynasty. That's another very, very, very famous mosaic that's in Hagia Sophia. Another one is the Komneni, but this is very famous. Now, why is also Byzantium?
We were so engagement for 20 or 30 years, politicians and other parties that
Why is also Byzantium important? Oh, for women, women held real power in Byzantium. This is something that's not taught. This is important for our children, for our wives, for our sisters, for the women. They need to understand, and we need to be taught this history, that there were actually empresses that ruled alone in Byzantium. Theodora, Justinian's wife, actually is the one that gave women the right to own property. This is another one of the images that I have made for my upcoming Hellenic history series book, by the way, to the right. And you can see Theodora was the one that saved the empire. She persuaded Justinian to not give up to the mobs. There was riots that were happening in the hippodrome with different factions of it's called the Nika riots of teams, like modern day teams, but this was like amplified by 10 times, and they almost broke into a civil war that went to overthrow Justinian, and she actually saved him in the empire. So as I mentioned, women were empresses, princesses, and regents that governed alone and with men, and sainthood was equally reserved for women as well. And as a little interesting fact, the only other time so many women ruled with men was in Ptolemaic Egypt, Alexander the Great's Hellenistic era. You see Cleopatra VII, Berenike, Asinoi, and so many others. So the Macedonian women ruled with men during that era as well. By the time of Justinian, this is the 6th century AD. The empire was small again because the West had fallen, and Justinian and his very able general Belisarius was able to recover a lot of territory from the old Roman Empire, Italy, places in North Africa and southern Spain and France, the south of France, and this was the extent of the Byzantine Empire now. And you can see another image of Justinian that I have created, bringing him to life, holding a Hagia Sophia, and the law code. And this is Justinian's now empire. So now the Roman Empire is ruled from the east, from Constantinople, strictly. And in theory, there are 3 Romes. It was Rome, Constantinople was the new Rome, and after the fall of Constantinople, Moscow is the 3rd Rome. That's kind of this map mentions, but this is the extent of the Byzantine Empire. This is a Hagia Sophia without the minarets. Nice illustration. You can see how this building that was it was basically the architects engineered it in 6 years. Anthemius and Isidore, they built it in 6 years, which I believe another basilica from the west. Hold on a second. I think St. Peter's or something like that took like more than 50 years to build, or 100. So this was a engineering marvel. This was built under Justinian as his gratitude towards God for keeping the empire together and him alive. And he was a devout Christian. So it was engineering and a scientific marvel. And just alone because of this church, which was emulated throughout the whole empire, this was considered the seat of God. So when you read in the Bible, in the Old Testament, about when God will come and live on earth for 1,000 years, this was it. This was Byzantium, and this is where he theoretically, if he believed so, would have lived in Hagia Sophia. This is how important this was to the soul of the Byzantine Empire and the Greek nation. Justinian was very important because he wrote the old laws of the Roman Empire, codified them, and wrote a book. And this is what we follow in the West. And Justinian's law, actually code, was modified even more by Basil the Macedonian a few hundred years later, in 800, late 8th century. It was recoded into the Basilica and written in Greek as well. So between Justinian and Basil the Macedonian, the Western world and governments use these laws of the old Greco-Roman Empire. That is very, very important, the civilization. Without these, we wouldn't have law. After Justinian, we go into Basil II, the Bulgaroctonos, the Bulgar slayer, one of the second golden age of the Byzantine Empire, which is the Macedonian dynasty and the Macedonian Renaissance. This is another presentation I have made to show. For 200 years, this dynasty basically was a superpower, although it shrunk by this time period between 862 and 1057 AD, but it was now more centered around southern Italy, Greece, Anatolia, and the Balkans. And it was Basil that brought in a golden age. This is the extent of the empire. It goes up to Syria and Antioch. If you follow the purple, he had to wage a lot of wars against many invaders, Bulgarians, Arabs, Persians, Normans, Russians, over and over. And he was, like Alexander the Great, a great ruler that lived to a very old age, over 88, and he was still an emperor and ruling and riding his horse and living with his soldiers. So when he died, he left a humongous treasury of gold that has been unsurpassed ever. So he knew how to govern. He created themes, organized the empire, and when there was a civil war that was about to destroy Byzantium between the aristocrats, he was able to get another of his enemies at the time, Vladimir the Great of the Kievan Rus, modern day Russia, the Grand Prince, to become allies by getting 6,000 of his personal bodyguards called the Varangian Guard. And what that did is those 6,000 elite mercenaries became the official bodyguards of all the emperors of Constantinople afterwards. Vladimir fell in love with his sister Anna through a political alliance. He converted the Russians, Belarusians, Ukrainians, all the early Kievan Rus people into Greek Orthodox Christianity. And Basil was able to win and expand the influence of the empire now to the Slavic lands. Basil's other niece, his sister Anna, married Vladimir, and she became the Tsarina. And his other niece, Theophano, married Otto II of the Carolingian Empire in Germany. She's the famous princess that brought the fork to the Germans. So in one family, in one dynasty, a Macedonian dynasty, they helped bring Western civilization, Greek civilization, Christianity to the Slavs, and a certain more finer civilization to the Germans, the Carolingian court. Otto III is Stefano's son, for those historic buffs, if you didn't know. So that's a very, very important dynasty. Basil II is humongously influential. Now, when you enter Hagia Sophia, speaking about the Macedonian dynasty, this is the main entrance. I had taken pictures. So you see a man robed, an emperor. He's bending down, kneeling to God. So this is Leo VI, the wise. This is Basil the Macedonian's son, the first Basil, the Macedonian dynasty, of the dynasty. And he is bowing to God.
Yeah.
Just look at the images for a second. And
I gotta catch up to you.
I'm with you.
No, you're not.
Yes, I am. I'll sleep with you. I'm just playing.
just stay with us for a moment.
I'm with the stimulus.
I think you're gonna have some Saturday, otherwise it would be.
I don't think so. I thought they said they're not gonna make it.
We're having a little technical difficulty. Okay.
Billy, is that coming from your mic?
No, I do hear it.
Okay, I'm gonna mute everybody again. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Okay.
That's fine. That's kind of the noise you would hear when you go into Hagia Sophia as all the tourists. It's kind of the same atmosphere situation. Oh boy. All right.
I said, maybe she got a podcast. Yeah, you can get it on your phone.
And we have got to get to a point in this country where we are supporting our families and our, it's our focus. What's right for
I think we're clear now. So the message reads is peace be upon you, I am the light of the world. That's Christ. To Leo the Wise, which is Basil the Macedonian son. So this is the first image you see when you enter Hagia Sophia. These are the great big I guess steel or bronze doors. I mean, my head will only go in the bottom half, even smaller of the middle. That's how, you know, these doors are humongous. And you walk in, and then there's another archway inside, and then you walk in again, and then you eventually get into the main cathedral. This is another of the main images in Hagia Sophia, and this ties in are the emperors that we're speaking about right now. So the Justinian is giving a model of Hagia Sophia, and that's the one, I guess, to my left or to the right of the Panagia. That's Justinian offering Hagia Sophia and the Christ child and Christ, and Constantine the Great to Panagia's left is offering the city of Constantinople, and this is one of the most famous images, and that's why I can't stress reiterating the fact that when we discuss Byzantium and we keep on thinking, oh, it's the last part that was Greek. No, that is very wrong, because these people were Greek. I mean, whether they were Greco-Roman or have you, was the same thing. They thought, they spoke, and they developed our civilization. I mean, Constantine the Great was cousins with Julian, the emperor that tried to revert back to paganism. Is called the apostate. But for some reason they call him Greek, but Constantine, you know, like Aladdin, which is bizarre. They all went to school with Saint Basil the Great, the hierarchs of the church. All of the early saints are these Greek-speaking and Greek peoples that formed the early Christian church, and they're all based on the East, and they're all based in. About 80% of the saints are kind of based out of Syria and Anatolia, which is modern day Turkey. So think of the loss of what we took as a nation from the genocide. We lost a lot, and to bring it back to Hagia Sophia, I didn't even know this, but this was actually built. I'm sorry, this was commissioned also during the Macedonian dynasty, either during an early Russian raid in 923, or they believe it was when the Basil II defeated the Bulgarians, and this was commissioned. So I've been telling you about the Macedonian dynasty, not because I just like that and I like Alexander the Great. This is specifically important to Hellenism, Macedonia, and what happened with this Treaty of Prespers that they signed, and they made this North Macedonia a nation, is disgusting. You know, it's an affront to our culture and our civilization, where Macedonia is the shield of Greece, where, you know, Athens and Sparta were the heart and soul. Without Macedonia, there would be no Greece. And time and time again through history, Macedonia plays a very important role. There's a second Macedonian dynasty. This is the one for 200 years under Basil II. The codes of Justinian are written in the Basilica. There are empresses, Zoe and Theodora, Constantine Porphyrogenitos, all these famous names, Jan Zimiskis, Nikiforos Phokas, who reclaim all the lands that we lost to the Arabs, Cyprus, Crete under Basil. These are Basil's stepfathers. They reclaimed Crete and Cyprus, you know, and a lot of places in Asia Minor. So that's a very, very serious issue that we need to pressure our government and to actually re-educate ourselves and our children, because without this history, we don't know, you know, if you don't look to the past, you cannot unlock the future. this is what we should believe in and we should understand. You can't live in the past, obviously, but you need to know your past, and that's the only way you can unlock your future and make a better future and a better world. Now, unfortunately, now after the apogee of Byzantium, the second one, which was the Macedonian dynasty, and that was a very beautiful exhibit at the Metropolitan Museum a few decades ago. It was one of the highest grossing exhibits ever. That was the glory of Byzantium. That was the Macedonian dynasty. The first one being Constantine era to Justinian, and the last one is the Paleologos. But that one was the highest grossing and the most, I think it broke the record of tourists in the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. That was the Byzantium, the Golden Age. But after that, unfortunately, new enemies were coming to Constantinople was the jewel city of the world, and it had a lot of enemies. And now the Latins that failed to recapture a lot of places, the Crusaders in the Middle East. I'm just gonna mention a couple of just little tidbits about the Crusades, just because this is just an introduction, and we have enough people, just to get your interest going. The first crusade was called on by Alexios Komnenos in I believe 11 in the 1100s, right? 1104, something like that. I'm not sure right now, but it was after the Macedonian dynasty ended, 1057, and eventually the Komneni dynasty formed. And Anna Komneni, Alexios' daughter, was a famous historian that wrote the Alexiad. And she was a brilliant women historian and scientist, and actually she worked in the hospital system of Constantinople, and she wrote this history. And in it we learned that the after Muhammad came, it was another great emperor, Heraclius, who's the one that crushed the Persians in the 600 middle of the 7th century. And after he defeated the Persians, Heraclius, a new enemy came about in the form of the Arabs. Muhammad united the Bedouin tribesmen of Arabia with his new religion, Islam, which at the time was thought to be just a heretical sect of Christianity, either Arianism or Nestorianism, and they didn't do much about it. And at the same time, Heraclius and the Byzantine Empire had exhausted themselves fighting the Persians, one of the many Persian empires of Hosroes, and that was the Persian king. So after he defeated the Persians, a new threat came, and the Arabs were swarmed up from Arabia with a new religion and started taking over lands. And all the lands in the fringe of the Byzantine world in the Middle East that somehow, because of the wars, were dissatisfied with government, with taxation. And they said, you know what, maybe we'll go with this side for now and not side with Constantinople. We'll go with Muhammad. Maybe we don't like the Persians. And this caused a lot of a land loss. All right. But that was eventually solved. But the Arabs eventually captured and took over Beirut, Damascus, which are Byzantine Greek cities, and created their own civilization afterwards. So we had also wars against them, as I mentioned, later on after Heraclius in the time of Basil II. They were checked in south of Syria, and we had taken back Cyprus and Crete, which were taken over by the Arabs for a few hundred years. So those were lost. Eventually, North Africa, Egypt, which was Alexandria, was Greek, and other cities in the Levant, Syria, Palestine, Lebanon, Israel is now. There were a lot of Greek cities that were Byzantine. They were taken over by the Arabs slowly. So this became a problem, and eventually a new threat came from the east again, the Seljuk Turks, and they started establishing themselves in Asia Minor. These are like another proto-Turkish people before the Ottomans, and now you had they also became Muslim, and it became even more invasive, and now the crusade of Alexios Komnenos in the 1100s was called not as a crusade, as actually help from, hey, you guys, in the western part, Rome and the other places, he asked the Pope for help. We need some aid. We got to reclaim the Christian Greek lands. These are Orthodox lands. You know, these are universal lands, but they're part of the Byzantine Empire. You need to help us reclaim them back from the Muslim Arabs that have taken them over, Jerusalem and all those areas over there. And the Latins in the First Crusade were good. They went to help, but eventually other issues like took over, and the goodness of the cause became more corrupt. So in the Fourth Crusade, in the year 1204, these Latin, Franks, Germanic, whatever we call them, crusaders, they secretly attacked a city in one of the Croatia now that was called Zara, another Christian city. They took its gold, and then they were excommunicated by the Pope. But they didn't tell anybody about it. And then they went on, and there was a dispute in Constantinople between the emperors and another faction, and they used that as a key to divert the forces that were going to Alexandria to reclaim the Alexandria and then Jerusalem from Egypt. They're like, we're going to take a detour to Constantinople, settle this dispute, because there's another emperor. They're claiming the throne, and we're going to do some dealings there. But what they did was actually sack the city, and they snuck in. It was a vicious attack, and the full Crusader force took over Constantinople, which was impregnable. All right, so this actually is the one blow that dealt, the death blow that dealt the Byzantine Empire to start collapsing sooner than later, and it was done by fellow Christians. How Christian they were now, that's something to be discussed and debatable. But not all the Crusades were against the Muslims and of the Middle East. So the Fourth Crusade was against Constantinople, and they figured if we take it over, we're going to bring it back to the righteous, true Western Catholic Christian tradition, and it will be okay. So that's how they viewed it, and that's when Hagia Sophia for the first time now becomes a Latin church for about 58 years. Constantinople is recaptured, this time by the new dynasty, Palaiologos dynasty, in 1261. So for that period between 1204 and 1261, it was converted to the Catholic Church, and there was a Catholic and medieval Germanic and French fiefdoms that were formed throughout mainland Greece and the islands. And from this point on, a lot of the islands are going to be Venetian or Frankish. Frappe. So it keeps us going. So unfortunately, from this point on to 1204, the Byzantine Empire's international power wanes just a little bit, but the Palaiologos dynasty, the last dynasty, does recapture the spirit, although it's going to be smaller, and it carries on for another 200 years and forms even another golden age of spirituality and actually of theology. Now this is what your Crusaders will look like. To the right, and then the left is Byzantines and the Varangian Guard. Those are the Rus, which were also Anglos now, and Danes that were part of the imperial bodyguards. So they were not like sheep that were ready to be slaughtered. There was fighting that happened, and it was a very evil and nasty maneuver on the part of the Crusaders to destroy a fellow Christian kingdom. Rape, pillaging. They sacked Hagia Sophia, a lot of the quarters of Constantinople. And this is one of the things that carries on in the rift between the East and the West, the Catholics and the Orthodox in Europe. It begins in 800 AD when Charlemagne, the Germanic king, becomes an emperor by his own accord, forcing the Pope of that time to crown him. And then eventually that helps form, Northern Europe, the kingdoms of northern Italy, Spain, Germany. They form with Charlemagne's ancestors, but they also create another empire called the Holy Roman Empire that becomes a rival to Byzantium, and they usurp the name Roman. That's why it's important to understand Roman was not specifically something that was just Latin. It was the Greek Roman Empire and the Latin Roman Empire, and then now we have a Germanic Roman Empire, a Holy Roman Empire. So they're the ones that eventually, once Greece falls, the Turks will no longer exist as a political entity, they began to formulate what Byzantium is because they know, and when they write the books, their ancestors, they write it from their own point of view, and that's the kind of the problem that we have these days. This understanding of what a Eastern Roman was or a Byzantine. How Greek were they, right? So the Palaiologos dynasty from 1261 ends in 1453. This is actually from one of my short films from my band Phoenix Rain. We did a short film filming Byzantines for the first time. We had to create all these costumes called Constantinople 1453 and the Eve of the Fall. But these are some of the costumes of the time period. And shields, these are the symbols of the Palaiologos dynasty, which become the symbols of more or less the whole of Byzantium. The double-headed eagle is more important at this time because now the empire is looking east and west, which it had from the beginning. But this double-headed eagle becomes more important during the Palaiologos dynasty because even though Greece is smaller now, more geared in the Balkans and Greece and some parts of Asia Minor, it's still very influential and still is a very important state in world affairs and in Europe. So for many princes of the West, in order to actually legitimize their own crowns, they would have to marry sometimes a Byzantine princess. You know, that's how important Constantinople was to marry a Porphyrogenita, somebody that was born in the royal purple chamber of the emperor and empresses in Constantinople, in the Black Ornate Palace. Constantinople was always important, even until the very, very end. These are some images from a famous artist, Yannis Nikou, of the last stand of Palaiologos. Palaiologos was actually about his mother was Serbian, he was Greek, a little Italian, but he was what a Byzantine is. He had many. Nobody's 100% of anything, but he felt Greek. He was Greek, and he fought for Greece. That's what Constantine Palaiologos was. But we share common bond with the Serbs, even Bulgarians, with the Russians, and many other people, and Armenians. They're all considered sort of our cousins, and they're all Byzantine as well. So when we talk about this, it's a double connotation to the name of Byzantine. You're a Greek, but you're also something more. You're a Christian, and that's why I wanted to mention that in the very, very beginning of the lecture. That in the modern context, yeah, it's a Greek empire. That's what it was. But back then, that didn't matter. And I want to specify this as well. If you lived in those times, you were a Roman, and you believe you're a Christian first, and then your ethnicity. You believed in God, and this was a Christian kingdom. All right, and your deeds were what made you, and it was the Christian theology. So we didn't just believe in the Bible. The saints' lives and the ecumenical councils are the ones that made Christianity, and that's what we follow. Those traditions and all the saints. But in the modern context, you would say it was a Greek Christian multicultural empire. And yes, it was the Roman Empire of the East. But because Greece never did enough to claim that, and there are certain things, I'm speaking to some government officials in Greece that are doing their best effort to rectify this mistake. Because now the Bulgarians are claiming Byzantium as their own. The Turks hold seminars on Byzantine theology. And I think the next year is going to be canceled finally because of what happened with the Hagia Sophia. The people are pulling out. They're holding these Byzantine seminars in Istanbul. We're losing our history. It's not just something that it's somebody else's. This is what when the Greek War of Independence happened, the people were Christian and they were Greek, but they were Romei. They believed in many different things. They could be Slavs. They could be other ethnicities as well, but they believed in that cause. And when we won our independence, it's a dual holiday. It's an ethnic national holiday, and it's a Christian holiday, the Virgin Mary, right? So that's not because it was something political that was conjured up, and we have to believe. That's because that's what they believed in. They were gonna recapture Constantinople, retake Hagia Sophia, and grow from there. Now there were two different ideas. One will be a more Western Byzantine Empire. Another will be more, more theological, monarchist version of it. But it was not something that they have us believe now that that didn't exist. The Turks were better. They administered the people so well. They committed no genocide, and the people living under the Ottoman Empire would live much better conditions than under the Byzantines, who now they say the Byzantines conquered Greece, which is also very, very wrong. So these are some of the things that we need to kind of understand. Again, go to a museum, go to the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, read some books, Vasilios, Michael Grant. There's many Osagorsky. There's many historians that are the sources for Byzantine history. And right now they escape me some of these things, but I can share them with you. Some are not so academic, some are just more simple. John Julius Norwich had written a trilogy on Byzantium, which was great. And it goes through the whole history. That's easier to read. It's less academic, but very historical. And there's many also, if you're a buff of historical novels, Yorgos Leonardos. If you read Greek, they write a lot of Byzantine novels and so forth. And that's kind of it. This is a little introduction to Byzantium. Yeah, we cannot recap 1100 years, and it's going to be very boring. But I want to have more, hopefully, and we spark a conversation to discuss these things, and not just to think about why it fell. Why is it always important that we talk about the fall, and all we do is, the Greeks, we lost something. How about celebrating the 1100 years prior to the fall of Constantinople and explaining this is what we're proud of, really. We're proud of all the saints that we created, this world that made Western Europe, influenced the Islamic world, the Slavic worlds. Without Byzantium, you don't have none of those modern civilizations in the East, the Slavs, and the West. All right, Byzantium and Constantinople are the keys. And modern Greece now doesn't have Constantinople, doesn't have Alexandria, doesn't have Jerusalem, Antioch. We're in a very delicate and weird point in our history. But as many of you understand, Hellenism and Orthodoxy are everywhere, and we're here in New York, and we're doing our part to create our little Hellenic Byzantine, world. So we haven't lost anything, and it's not something we need to get back those places. But if you have a chance to visit whenever it's safe, I do suggest that you do. All right, that's it for now. And if you like what I do, follow me on Patreon. That's a website that's called the Hellenic History Series, where we do these educational shows, the illustrated book, music. My band Porphyra does Greek-oriented rock music, metal with Greek folk music, mythology. We blend in all that stuff. Operas. I work with opera people. So we do a lot of educational programs in Patreon, or on my website. You can see the billychrissochos.com or the porphyrafoundation.org.
Brother Billy Chrissochos, thank you very much. A wonderful presentation. We will definitely be doing more of the Hellenic History series. The AHEPA family of Hempstead thanks you so much for coming out tonight and being able to do this with us, to give us, if you will, a crash course. Our pleasure. Thanks for being here. And I do want to point out, I want to thank the members that joined us tonight. I'd like to thank President John Kokolakis from the Hermes chapter for being here with us. I'd like to thank Past District Governor Mike Capus for being here with us. I'd like to thank Past District Governor Demi Pamboukis for being here with us tonight, and all the other members of the Supreme and the District Lodge. I would like to begin, Brother Billy, with some questions. I'm going to go with the first questions that we had, and the first question comes from Keith Kevelson. And Keith Kevelson says, Billy, did Byzantium strengthen ethnic ties between Greeks and Armenians? Again, the question is, did Byzantium strengthen ethnic ties between Greeks and Armenians?
Yes, that is a very good question, and I'd love to answer it, of course. The Armenians played a very important role in the Byzantine world, and even especially during the Macedonian Renaissance era, when there was more interaction with the Armenian kingdom. There were a lot of Armenians in government, in the armies, generals, and princes. In different times, there were even some Armenian emperors. So yes, it did. That's why we consider Armenians, brothers, even though at times they had a different, slightly, there were different type of the religion. There were monophysites. Some are also Orthodox. But we do have very strong ties with the Armenians, and they were also very influential in Byzantium.
Thank you.
So, thank you. I would also like to welcome, I saw that we have the president of Port Jefferson, Brother Nick Galogridis, with us as well. Thank you for being here. I would also say the second question comes from Eleni Pufas, and I'm hoping I'm saying this correct. It was more of a statement. She said that Byzantium also had shipping routes from Egypt down the coast of Africa to Asia. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that, Brother Billy?
Yes, of course, Eleni. That is a very good question as well. We had established not only trade routes within the deep Eastern Africa and North Africa, we had also very important ties with the Kingdom of Ethiopia. So when I mentioned Russia before, Russia was never part of the Byzantine Empire. It was part of the Byzantine Commonwealth, just like Ethiopia was. So Ethiopians were Christians similar to the Greeks, Greek Orthodox. There were also some Copts, some of the different variations, but the bulk of them were Orthodox Christians from the time, and then Christians and biblical people from the time of the Old Testament. So from Alexander the Great's Hellenistic era up until Byzantium, Ethiopian was part of the Greek world, and that's how we know of Africa, through Ethiopia. And yes, we had the trade routes, and there were trade routes from Ethiopia to India, and I also went through the Nile to the Mediterranean into the Constantinople ports as well. So yes, that is very true, and we had contact with the African kingdoms like the Ethiopians and others.
Thank you, Brother Billy. So moving now to our third question for tonight's list of viewers. Here we have our past district governor, Brother Demi Pamboukas. I'd like to tell you that he had a great job watching this tonight. He said you did a fantastic job. Another great work from Brother Billy, outstanding lecture pertaining to Hellenism as a core value of AHEPA. The question he had was, did Byzantium Empire combine church and state? The question is, did the Byzantine Empire combine church and state? That's the question.
Hi, Brother Demi. Yes, that is correct. It was a theocratic state. As I mentioned, this was the kingdom of God. It was a Christian empire that lasted 1,100 years. So everything dealt around Christianity. The law, government, the arts. That's where the art is different. We kind of like move away from the statues and different 3D aspects of art to become 2D, frescoes, mosaics. It's a different idea, and there was a movement that happened before Justinian, this iconoclastic movement that some of the emperors, which are now called heretics and empresses, believed that believing in icons and imagery, statues and all that stuff, was deemed pagan as part of the old Hellenic pagan world ways, and they were banned. They were destroyed and smashed. And for over 150 years, the empire was iconoclastic and it was in turmoil. And up until the time of Justinian and Theodora, they kind of cleared that. I'm sorry, actually, it's after Justinian. Sorry about that. It's after Justinian, but there was the iconoclasm period that was cleared up by the late 800 AD. But a lot of the icons. So what happened is then afterwards is the ecumenical councils decided that yes, imagery is needed, but the statues are not. But the two-dimensional version of the depictions of God and the saints and the biblical images are okay, because we're not praying to them. They're just like a vessel, all right, and it's not a pagan thing. But statues were not so popular as in the West, but the icons were in frescoes. That explains.
Brother Billy,
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you. Brother Billy, the next question is also from Demi Pamboukas. Did the Byzantine Empire, did the empire have a strong military, And how did they defend themselves? Question is, did the empire have a strong military, and how did they defend themselves?
The empire had there's three periods that you can't just talk about one empire. It's one empire, but there's different dynasties and different periods, because we're spending 1100 years. That's over 1,000 years of history, land, and territory. So in every period, except for give or take a few hundred years, because of many invasions from new peoples of Europe and the Middle East that were invading, and whenever there's a movement of an emperor that didn't have a proper hire, and there was anarchy, that's when there was a weakness in the link, and the army was not as strong. But through three golden ages, from Constantine's era to Justinian's, or Heraclius, and then the Macedonian dynasty, and then the Palaiologos dynasty, it was a super state. Especially in the High Middle Ages, between 800 and about 1100 AD, it was a superpower, and it had actually some of the best soldiers in the world. But also eventually they were getting more mercenaries to also fight in the wars, because they were paid very well. And the most elite of these mercenaries that I mentioned, that became part of the actual elite bodyguards of the emperors of Constantinople, were the Varangians. Originally Kievan Rus, the Russians, then Danes and Anglos and Vikings. So they converted, and they were paid, and they were trusted. So sometimes they would use the native Greeks and other peoples that were part of the military infrastructure. Sometimes they would use mercenaries or very trusted military mercenary units like the Varangians that swore their oath directly to the emperor, because there were going to be civil wars throughout, and there were other conflicts. And if you're not paying enough your soldiers, they might go to the other side. So, these were issues that had to be dealt with. There were books written. The Emperor Maurice, Constantine Porphyra wrote treatises of how to deal with the enemies and how to work the military and create a powerful, military system, and not having to fight all the time. This is what's important about Byzantium, and that's what the West didn't understand. They didn't need to always fight. They used diplomacy, and they used manipulation. Why waste life when we can do things better and not having to fight? But when we do have to fight, we're gonna take you over, and basically we're gonna win. Except when it was different shifts of human populations that overwhelmed the empire, which is just like the Roman Empire of the West and other things that happened. But just to answer the question, for the 1100 years, there were definitely a lot of key eras that were superior in military to other neighbors.
Thank you, Brother Vasilios, Chrissochos. We have another question was regarding the double-headed eagle. You said that was created, was it in 1453 rather? And
No.
the face to east and west, can you elaborate on that? And can you also please explain that you had mentioned the Turks hold Byzantine theology. So it was a double-headed eagle. What was created? When was it created? Why it faces east and west? And the Turks hold theology. Yes, that was.
That's very good, because the double-headed eagle is the symbol of Byzantium and the Eastern Roman Empire. So it's one of the symbols of modern Greece. Some of the army units. Now that's a symbol that was from the beginning, from Constantine's time, but it became more popular later. And I'll explain if I can remember right now. So the eagle itself, the one-headed eagle, that goes back to Zeus, right? Ancient Greece. The Romans have it as well, and the standard, the eagle becomes the symbol of one of the lavara of the empire. One of the early ones was also the writing that Constantine saw the vision in the sky when he defeated his enemy, the other emperor, and it shows Jesus Christos Nika, the famous sign, becomes the other lavaro. Um, but the double-headed eagle eventually uh, it becomes a dynastic symbol of the Palaiologos dynasty in 1261, more officially. It was always part of the regiments and the emblems from the
So
beginning.
1260.
Yeah, so officially it becomes the Palaiologos dynasty. There's one version, the one with the yellow background. That's 1261.
1261. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So
And then,
until 1453 and until it's always resurrected is one of the symbols.
and the east to west, the facings.
Ah, so the Greco-Roman Empire, right? This is the Eastern Roman Empire now. When it shifted to Constantinople, um, it always looked east and it always looked west. That's one of there's two theories. One was because the Roman Empire was so large, there was a Greek East and a Latin East, Catholic or Orthodox, or from the Greek version, I guess it's from Constantinople. We're looking to the east because it was also from Alexander the Great's Hellenistic world, and then the Greco-Roman world. We're looking to the east because we're always eastward, and then we're looking to the west because we are the empire of the Mediterranean world. So it had to look at both directions.
Right. Okay.
And theories, they're not 100%. There's a few different variations to that.
Understood. Thank you, Vasily. A question for you was in regards to the Turks holding Byzantium theology. Can you just elaborate a little more on that?
Yes. Oh, actually, just to remember, so the Mother Church, which is it's also the symbol of the church as well as the Palaiologos dynasty, was a symbol of the church as well. When the nationalistic movements of the 1800s, a lot of the countries broke from the Ottoman Empire or the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and they made their nation states. A lot of them took the double-headed eagle, and if you notice that the patriarchal, double-headed eagle, the Greek one, the wings are down. All the other ones that flew away from the coop, their wings are up. So that's because their influence comes from Constantinople, whether it's the Hungarians, the Serbians, the Russians, and other Germanic peoples. They had that. That was part of their crests and symbols. Now with the Turks for a lot of years have been holding international seminars on Byzantium in Istanbul. I think they're based out of Zurich. I'm not sure, but they've been holding them there, not in Greece. So they actually get to propagate their own version of what Byzantium is. And if you haven't been to Turkey or any of those places, even if you go to, say, for instance, Hagia Sophia, what they will tell you is this is a Roman cathedral. It was built by Justinian. If you go to Smyrna and you see some ancient Greek ruin with Greek writings, that will tell you that's a pre-Roman ruin. They will not say the word Greek. They will not say the word Byzantine too much either, but they will say Roman because they're twisting the analogy, because they, to them, they knew us as Romans, but the West thinks of Romans as being, Italian, and they're using that and manipulating that right now. And they're holding their own seminars, but it was this year's is going to be canceled. It's not going to take place in Istanbul.
Thank you, Brother Vasily. The next question comes from Eleni Pufat, and I hope I'm saying this correctly, pronouncing this correctly. Eleni had asked the question, what do you think was the key factor leading to the Great Schism? What do you think was the key factor leading to the Great Schism?
Thank you. That's actually, it's a very good topic for a whole other lecture, but
which we'll be doing more of.
Yeah, I did mention a little bit. It all begins with this guy, this emperor of the West called Charlemagne, Charles the Great, when he crowns himself as emperor of the Romans in the year December 800. I always forget dates, the certain dates I will never forget, and that's a specific historical date that we should not forget, because that was the beginning of the end and the schism of the East and the West. Because just like when the Turks, a more barbaric people, became Muslim and took over the Arabs, they conquered them, which were more civilized at the time and had their own civilization. The Germanic peoples were barbarians that took over the Roman West part of the empire and became Christians. So they had a different version of what Christianity would be. and they had different aspirations. And it all begins in 800, and it culminates in the next, about 200 and so years, 254 years, because by then the Germanic people had taken over the Italian peninsula as well. But just don't forget, the Greeks were always in Italy as well too. Magna Graecia existed. So those are not the ones we're talking about. We're talking about from central Italy and north. It was more Germanic. They had taken over. Franks, Normans, Lombards, Visigoths, right? So they now wanted to take over Constantinople, and they also started building their own Western European civilization, which France, Germany, Spain, and those places come out of Charlemagne's kingdom and his sons, Louis the Pious, Pepin the Short, and another son. They actually are the offspring that make the Holy Roman Empire, this thing that was not holy or Roman, but it was to become Western Europe, right? So the schism began in 800, but it culminated in this animosity between the two sects, because the Orthodox really were clueless what the Catholics were doing at this time. The Catholics were clueless what the Orthodox. They had cut relations, and it had sort of developed differently. And even though there were some Greek popes, there were anti-popes, some of the Byzantine emperors tried to influence the Vatican. It was very Germanic at this time. So that's the main difference. It was not the Roman Latin side that we were dealing with, that we were part of that world, the Greco-Roman world. Now it was a different entity that was absorbing the northern parts of the old Roman Empire.
Thank you, Brother Vasily. Also, Eleni Foufas, I'm pronouncing this correctly, had mentioned also, can you elaborate a little bit on the millennium-old slavery ended early in the Byzantine era?
The what?
The millennium-old slavery ended early in the Byzantine era?
Slavery?
Slavery.
Slavery existed in any society. Depends if you were a slave from the wars, though. I mean, it wasn't any indentured servants or things like that. If this is war slavery, so that's kind of, it was like anywhere else. But because it was a Christian world, it was different. They were treated different, slaves. They were not like the will be in the Muslim countries or in the Frankish kingdoms. They were treated much better. But there was no slavery per se. That wasn't part of this empire. It was just like that's just from war, from the battles. If there were slaves, what you would do is you would convert and you just join the society eventually, because this is very important. And I'm glad you kind of brought it up, because in this society, a slave, peasant, or an aristocrat or a noble could become an emperor. There was nothing stopping you from it. Now, you could do it violently, you can do it, passively, you can do it from your heroic deeds, or you can get, voted in by the army. But a slave could become an emperor, even a eunuch, sort of, or like a second in command, or a peasant. Basil the Macedonian was a peasant. He founded a whole dynasty. Other people not even ethnically Greek, different nationalities. So it's not slavery in any modern context. It was just from war, and it was not part of the society. That helps.
Thank you, Brother Billy. All right, so the next question is coming all the way from Melbourne, Australia. And the question is from Peter Boz. And the question is, was there any developments happening in the Peloponnese? In particular, is there any relation or connection to the revolution that eventuated in the 1900s, or there is nothing that can link the events? Let me repeat that again. So
I got it.
You got it?
Yeah, no, I was reading that before. Thank you. That's actually a very good question. I'm glad you asked. The Morea, which was the Peloponnese, known in the later part of the Byzantine Empire, was very, very important. And Mistra and a lot of places there were religious and intellectual sites and centers for southern Greece, right? So Paleologus was actually from there, the last emperor. He was actually one of the few that was not actually born in the purple chamber. He had to be crowned because of the Turks. He had to be crowned in the Moria, in Mistra, in the Peloponnese. So maybe that's kind of a little familiar link to the later revolutionary heroes that showed inspiration. But I mean, listen, the Peloponnese always will play a role in Greek history. It's just not prevalent always, throughout these thousands of years. Athens is not. Athens was like a village for many centuries. It was sort of semi-abandoned. The presence of Greeks was in Alexandria. It was in Antioch. It was in Jerusalem. It was in the Far East. It was in Italy. But to bring it all together, this nucleus of Greek civilization is part of the Peloponnese, and I come from there, so it's not like I don't like it. It definitely did form a good part because a lot of the revolutionary heroes came from there. But the revolution started elsewhere, though. Don't forget that as well. It's just the Peloponnese was easier to not only form the modern nation. It was kind of what we were allowed to from the great powers that be of the time. It was also easier to defend eventually because of all the islands around it. And it was just a more defensible and tactical entity to form the modern nation out of when the revolution began. But it was Asia Minor that was actually the heart of Greece also, which is modern Turkey. And to a certain extent, also the West, southern Italy, was also Western Greece. So Greece is not just the Peloponnese, but the West wanted Greece to not be any bigger than the Peloponnese originally, and that's why they gave us the Germanic monarchy, and they dictated what path to take, even though we didn't always follow. So I hope that answers that.
Yes, Brother Vasilios, Billy Chrissochos, we thank you very much. I have another question coming from Brother Peter Kosmas, and the question is, what is Turkey's claim to Hagia Sophia besides it being in Turkey? And the second part is to clarify, is there a Muslim claim?
Yes. So when I went there, and I traveled all over Turkey. The first time I went in '98 with a good friend, all over European Turkey. In fact, they're part of Thraiki. And then I went to the interior. I've been to Ankara, Cappadocia, Trapezuda, Caesarea, all those places. And I've seen how, things were from the ground. And we found, crypto Greek cities and villages and stuff like that. But when we went to Hagia Sophia, and when you ask Turks and you see their history books from their, from the tourism and their point of view, when you study them, when Mehmed the Conqueror took Constantinople, from the Prophet Muhammad, this was like what they wanted to take over. It was Hagia Sophia. That's the holy wisdom of God, and the Virgin Mary. This is the holy wisdom. This church was it has an energy, and it's something spiritual and something very important. And they wanted to conquer that. They didn't want to go just pray there. They wanted to take it over, and that meant the symbolic end of Greece and the Byzantine Empire and their awakening of their civilization. So if you're gonna take this from the point of view of the Central Asian nomads that were the Turks, cousins of the Mongols, who just knew how to conquer, they knew that to become a civilization and to become an empire, they needed to capture Constantinople and take Hagia Sophia and convert it into a mosque. The greatest mosque, their oldest mosque, and the grand mosque. That's what it is in Constantinople. If you ask the Turk, what is your oldest mosque, they'll tell you it's Hagia Sophia. So to them, it's a very symbolic because they conquered it and they wiped Byzantium, and they became the hires of Byzantium, the new Roman Empire in their point of view, right? So that's why that's important. And it became a mosque in, after 1453, a few years later. Mehmed the Conqueror made it into an imperial mosque, right, grand mosque, and it lasted until the time of Ataturk, the Turk took over Turkey in 1922-23. He made the modern Turkey, got rid of Arabic, Greek, and all that stuff, and more secular version. Still genocidal, still killed the same amount of people as the Ottomans did, but it was a different version of Turkish identity. Now it was looking towards the West. And Hagia Sophia was made into a museum in 1935, probably to appease the West a bit, make it more accessible for tourism, and to bring a better picture after the genocide of the Turks. But it became a museum and it stayed like that, and we were able to visit it. And in the late 80s, it became a UNESCO World Heritage Site. And but if you were there in '98, like when I was there, in 2000, this is even before Erdogan, took over. You're still not safe being in there. You can't do what you want. You can't say what you want. There's still spies, and we're in Hagia Sophia. Their monitor who says speaking Greek. If you're chanting what you're saying, there were spies, right? And Erdogan's vision, and he had proclaimed when he became a mayor of Istanbul and all that stuff, that he will make it into a mosque again, because he wanted to be a new sultan, and symbolically to create a new Ottoman Empire, like his plan is to do. You need to make that back into a mosque, because to them, being a museum was a sacrilege, and that the Turk made a grave mistake. And he banned the Treaty of Lausanne, and he wants to rewrite the treaties of the nation states that were formed from Greece and Turkey. So he's very evil. Right? It's very bad, and it has to be somehow stopped, remedied. But that's his vision, that's his plan, and that's the reason why he wanted to become another Mehmet the Conqueror, and before the Prophet Muhammad had mentioned that you have to conquer Hagia Sophia and something else. That's the story.
Brother Billy, we want to thank you very, very much for your time. Everybody that was here, thank you very much for all your time. I do want to just thank everybody again for joining us. And at this point in time, this looks like it will conclude our Hellenic History series. As the president of the Constantine Cassis chapter 170 in Hempstead, Long Island, New York, I'd like to thank you all for being a part of this, especially to those from different parts of the world, for all other chapter presidents, for all district support and all supreme, and all others that were here to join us. I especially would like to thank Brother Vassilios Billy Chrissochos, the Vice President of Hermes Chapter 186, and also the District 6 Director of Culture and Arts, for being here to give this presentation tonight. There will be others in the Hellenic History series. This is one of hopefully many to come via GoTo virtual meeting. I really do hope all of you enjoyed it this evening, and we thank you very, very much. Stay safe. Brother Billy, I'm going to leave the floor to you, and then we're going to close out tonight.
Again, thank you so much, Brother Anastasios, to AHEPA, and to all friends that are joining that are not AHEPA. And again, I just wanted to just end with reiterating that a lot of people in the world right now are against what's happening in Hagia Sophia, Muslims as well. It's just people in the Turkish government that are doing this, and that ideology that we're against, nothing else. And we need to bring Byzantium to our families, our schools, and to understand that without knowing that, we don't know where we're going. And we need to, remember the past to unlock the future. That's very important. And the Byzantine history and civilization is critical to our religion as Orthodox Christians and Christians in general. So this matters to everybody and to civilization in general. So, we have to respect this history, and we have to also understand it and learn it, as well as all the other aspects of our history before that and after. All right. I thank you again very much for having me and believing in this topic in this lecture and having me do it. And I thank you very much, Brother Anastasios and the AHEPA Hempstead family. Thank you.
We thank you, and thank you again, everyone. Have a great evening. Be safe. And we'll be sure to send out more information on the next Hellenic History series. Good night, everyone. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.